Rock Sport Management students. Hope everyone's doing well and that you had a great summer. Um, my name's Cole. I'm going to be the podcast administrator and co-host for this upcoming year for season 6 of the Sport Management Council podcast. Really excited. We're going to have some amazing guests, starting with our special guest today. On the line, I got Andrew with me, who's in his third year of the program. He's going to be serving as our social media administrator and also a co-host of the podcast. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew, who's going to introduce our special guest for today's episode.
Thank you so much, Cole. Today on the podcast, we are pleased to be joined by Mr. Brett Tessler. Brett has been an NFL PA certified agent since 1997, I believe, and providing services in career counseling, contract negotiation, endorsements, post-career counseling, just to name a few. With more than 600 NFL contracts successfully negotiated, Brett brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to this podcast, and we hope to get a lot of insider information, insights, and advice from this guy. So anything I missed, or you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
I mean, you forgot to mention the Nobel Prize, but who's counting?
Yeah,
But
right. You're right. My bad.
nah. Just that just about covers it. Been doing this for a while, as you said, and business has definitely changed a lot in the last 25 to 30 years that I've been in it. So these are some of the things that I'm sure we'll be getting into together here now.
For sure.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Brett. And with our first question, it's going to be kind of a typical one, but the one I got for you today is, what was the career path that led you to becoming a certified NFL agent? And what kind of inspired you to pursue being an agent as your career path?
Yeah. So basically, Cole, like you guys, and probably most of the people that are going to watch this that are thinking of pursuing a career in sports management, obviously you have to love sports. You have to have a real passion for it, not just obviously the games, but the statistics, the analytics, all the other things that really go into what we do. So grew up as a huge sports fan, and also always had a interest in business and negotiating. And so I think when you put all that stuff together, this was certainly the logical avenue for me to pursue. And the business, as I said, has definitely changed in terms of how new up and coming would be agents have to pursue it. When I got into it, it wasn't necessary to have a postgraduate degree. And so I was at Purdue University, and excuse me, there was a really good fullback there named Mike Allstott. And we knew some common people, and I got invited to his draft party and got to know him a little bit. And then when he got drafted by Tampa Bay, I said to him, "Hey, Mike, I'm from South Florida. I'm very familiar with that area. In fact, I had went to the University of Tampa for a couple of years before I transferred to Purdue." And so I said to him, I think I could probably hook you up with some endorsements, some appearances in the area. I know a lot of people there. So he was willing to give me a shot to do that. And so from there, started doing deals for him and just saw it as an opportunity. And then little appearances, autograph signings in the mall start turning into much bigger endorsements where I'm getting him huge national deals with apparel companies, getting him bigger deals than many of the star players in the NFL at that point were getting. And I then got certified with the NFL Players Association to become a registered contract advisor, or in layman's terms, a real agent. And so I did that. And at that point, you did not have to have a postgraduate degree, as I said. My plan originally was to go to law school to try to become an agent one day, but I ended up getting my opportunity right then and there. I was probably 22, 23. He and I were essentially the same age. And so I was the youngest, or certainly one of the very youngest certified agents in the business at that time. And from there, Mike had some teammates coming out of Purdue in the following years that I obviously had followed, being my alma mater, and those guys were still playing there when I was there. They were just underclassmen. And and Mike put in a good word for me with them. And, we're not talking about highly rated guys at that point. We're talking about guys who, in some cases, had nothing to lose by giving a new agent a shot. Guys who, in some cases, probably no other agents wanted. And was fortunate to get the opportunity to work with them, and did everything I could to help them, and they did everything they could to help themselves. And, in some cases, we ended up overcoming the odds and succeeding. And then throughout the years, you get better players and better players, to where now here we are 27, 28 years later, Pro Bowlers, multiple Super Bowl champions, team captains, NFL union reps. So very, very proud of what I've been able to do. And it wasn't necessarily something that happened overnight. It was definitely a process. I joke, being in this business, you do get some notoriety. So as I started to get some players down here on the Dolphins, one of the local writers did a big article on me. I was on the front page of the Sunday business section of the Miami Herald with a big picture. And that day I was actually flying. And so I'm sitting there reading the paper, and some guy sitting next to me, and he looks over and sees the picture and looks at me, and he's like, "Is that you?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "How's it feel to be rich and famous?" I go, "I could tell you what it's like to be famous," because the money definitely did not come quickly. But it's one of those things where, if in life you get an opportunity to do something you love, and if you have the goods, and if you're willing to hang in there and stick with it, in time, good things can happen.
For sure. That's awesome. Like you said, you gotta love sports to be in this business. So that kind of plays into this next question. But yeah, like that's kind of how I found this sport management program. I can't speak for Cole or other SPMA students, but I just knew that I love sports. I didn't really know what I wanted to do coming into university, and Brock's been like a second home for me with the sports management program. Everything's been amazing opportunities wise. So this next question goes into, what are your favorite aspects? You kind of touched on it, but what are your favorite aspects of being a certified NFL agent? Like, what is your favorite part of your job, and what are some of your biggest challenges that come with it?
So obviously, anytime you negotiate a huge deal, it's just such a great feeling. You just know that you helped make a major difference for somebody and their family, and future generations. You're talking about generational type wealth in professional sports, certainly in the NFL these days. So that's great. Obviously, anytime you see any of your clients succeed on the field, overcoming adversity. So, for example, the other night, Thursday Night Football, my client Greg Joseph on the New York Giants, who's a kicker, the week before they signed him, and he just got one kick and he missed it. And it was one of those things where, being a veteran guy, he's expected to make that kick, and I expect him to make it. The team expects him to make it, and nobody expects him to make it more than himself. So naturally, that was disappointing. And then the articles start coming of, are they going to let him go? Or are they going to move on from him? And then he goes out Thursday night on national TV against the Dallas Cowboys, and ends up going 5 for 5. And he's probably going to end up being the NFC Special Teams Player of the Week this week with that. And so, I'm just incredibly proud of that guy. So, in this business, there's a lot of ups and downs on the field, in the business side of things, obviously from a health side of things. So a lot of things like that. So probably, as somebody who probably overcame the odds myself to end up accomplishing what I have, anytime I see a client overcome the odds, and the funny thing is, sometimes you'll sign a guy who you think, all right, we just hit a grand slam here. There's no way this guy's not going to make it. This guy's going to get drafted pretty high. And for whatever reason, it doesn't pan out. And then there's other instances, like a client, say Raheem Mostert, for example. Here's a guy that when I signed him out of Purdue, he was kind of known more as a track guy. Never really produced very much from the running back position in college. But I felt like he had a skill set that would translate well to the NFL if we could get him an opportunity. We end up signing as an undrafted free agent. He ends up getting cut at the end of the preseason. And then to make a long story short, and that was with the Eagles, we then go to the Dolphins and they end up letting him go after a few weeks. And then we end up going to the Browns, finishes up this. No, I'm sorry. Then we go to the Ravens, finishes the season there. No, actually, they cut him before the end of the year. Then we go to the Browns. Then next preseason, Browns let him go. Then Jets, Bears, 49ers, all within a couple months. So, I mean, this guy's living out of a suitcase. But we didn't give up. He didn't give up. I knew what this guy was made of mentally. He trusted me. We were both committed to this. And, obviously you've seen him go on to accomplish many great things. NFC Championship Game MVP, set numerous NFL records, set Dolphins team records in touchdowns last year, led the NFL in touchdowns last year, and ended up being the starting Pro Bowler of the AFC running back. So things like that obviously are tremendously rewarding, and it's certainly the part of the business that I enjoy the most.
For sure.
Well, wow, that's pretty incredible. I always love hearing a nice underdog story, and I think Raheem and what he's been through exemplifies that to the fullest. That was actually going to be our next question, but I think you covered it. Super, super cool to see Raheem get that contract that he deserved at the end of this season. And during a contract year, he had franchise led the Dolphins in for touchdowns in a single season. So pretty incredible. Congrats to you and Raheem for that contract. So we're gonna go down.
And one more thing, Cole. Thank you. But I mean, one more thing that's so ironic about that's so surreal, is in 1984 or 5, Mark Clayton set that record. And so this is right when I was really becoming a Dolphin fan. I'm probably like 12, 13 maybe at that point.
Yeah.
And so, I was at all those games that year watching him do that, obviously with Dan Marino, getting him the ball. And so, again, every home game that year, I went with my family. And then to actually be at the game where Raheem ends up breaking that record, and I'm there with my son, it's incredibly surreal just to think about how it all kind of goes around,
It's definitely a full circle moment. I would
Yeah.
assume for sure. You got to feel kind of almost like a proud dad when one of your players does something like that, eh?
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, these days more like a proud dad. Earlier in my career, like a proud brother.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But getting a little bit white in the beard. So I still, one thing about this business, it definitely keeps me young, and so I still feel like I think the same way I did when I was young, which is good because you bring a real enthusiasm. You bring a real like sense of no fear. You know what I mean? Like, it's funny, like sometimes now I think back to some of the things I did when I was not much older than you guys, when I was first starting to represent players. And I'm like, man, I can't believe I pulled that off. Would I even try something like that today? Because sometimes, when you're young, you don't know what you don't know, and it ends up being a good thing. I still try to summon that same sort of approach to what I do for my clients, and I'm willing to try anything and everything to help them succeed. And once they put their trust in me, I will stop at nothing.
For sure. Cole, since we kind of just barely touched on yours, do you want to take the next question or you want me to go for it?
You can go for it, Andrew, honestly.
All right.
Yeah.
It also kind of touches on Raheem Mostert, actually. It was on Dolphins Talk podcast. You said that similar to Raheem Mostert, you like going after players that are under the radar. Is there any reason why, or is it why you enjoy this so much, or is it just to see like the potential outcome that he can be just as good as any of these like 5-star recruits?
Yeah, it's a great question, Andrew. It's a few things. Number one, I myself am sort of the underdog in terms of how I started in this business and how I ultimately progressed. Nobody gave me anything. Nothing came quick and easy. I wasn't handed a job at a major firm and given an unlimited budget to do what I needed to do. So, I started this from scratch, started from the very bottom, worked my way up. So I think I relate well to those kind of players. I think in life, if you're somebody who has to do it on your own, I think it gives you a greater sense of appreciation for what you've accomplished. And, it doesn't matter whether you come from a family with a lot of money or no money. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just having your own vision, being your own man, carving your own trail. And that's kind of what I ended up doing. My father was in real estate down here in South Florida, owned properties. And I worked with him for like a minute, just while I was kind of getting this going, but wasn't making a lot of money. My dad was old school, so it wasn't like he's like, hey, here's $100,000 a year or whatever. I mean, I was getting paid nothing, but it gave me enough money to be able to, pay the bills, um, put gas in the car, things like that,
For sure.
enough to be able to buy a plane ticket to go fly to meet with a player, that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I think because of the circumstances in which I ended up getting to where I am today, you never really lose that chip that you needed to get you where you got. So, for example, take Tom Brady, for example.
Yep.
I guarantee you, if he were the first pick in the draft, he would have never become the player that he is or was. It's because he was a late round pick, and the fact that he knew he couldn't take anything for granted, and the fact that he knew he was better than those other quarterbacks drafted ahead of him. The same way that at a very young age, I knew I was better than a lot of the established agents in this business because, yeah, they may have had more experience than me, but there's no way that those guys wanted it more. There's no way those guys cared more about the players that they were working for than I was going to. And so I never doubted that I'd be able to do this. But again, it was a process. And so that's why I'm not afraid to take on somebody who may not be the highest rated guy as long as I see the traits in them that indicate that they could be successful. And so there's that. And number two, it's just kind of because, again, I wasn't starting out representing the top pick in the draft from day one. It's just like that's kind of helped me. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been my MO. So it's just sort of been like my model. It's worked. And so why change something that isn't broke? And on top of that, again, I find that a lot of the kind of guys I work with, and again, make no mistake, I'm not afraid to sign a good draft pick, but it's more one of those things where unlike other agents who have gotten big and think that it's beneath them to take on somebody who is undrafted. I mean, heck, as I'm looking at the jerseys behind me, there you see Mostert, and we talked about his story. Here you have Mike Remmers, a guy who came out of Oregon State, undrafted, no combine, no all-star game, no nothing. People asked me, scouts that I knew in the NFL were asking, why are you messing with that guy? And I repped one of his teammates the year before who ended up being the highest drafted non-combine, non-all-star game guy. And so I got to know Mike a little bit, and I really liked him and wanted to help him. Guy ends up being a starting tackle for 10 years in the league. He got cut by a bunch of teams. One year we signed to the Vikings practice squad at the start of the season. And 1 week into the season, they cut him because they didn't think he was good enough. Then we end up bouncing around, ends up starting in Carolina. 2 years later, the Minnesota Vikings end up signing him to a $30 million deal. So just kind of funny how things work. Charlie Hewlett right there, Cleveland Browns, been their captain for 5 years, highest paid in the league at his position at various points. A guy who's just played his 150th straight game. So it just goes to show, just like in life, it's not where you start, it's where you finish.
For sure. It's almost
Yeah.
from your point of view, you almost have not nothing to lose, but like the amount of commitment for like a lower tier, like the higher skill guys that are like projected to go. I'm sure the lower guys have a way more down to earth like perspective on sports, no?
Yeah, like anything again in life, the easier something comes for you, I believe that in many cases, the less you kind of appreciate it.
Hmm.
And so I always tell my clients that to a degree, I actually feel bad for someone like Caleb Williams. And people are like, gee, how could you feel bad? This guy was, the top player in college, the number one pick in the draft. He just, was given money that will last 10 generations in his family. That's true. But there's things in life that money can't buy. And one of those things is, again, a sense of really paying your dues, a sense of really overcoming adversity, defying the odds. And so I tell some of my clients when we talk, whether it's me talking to Mostert or Hewlett or some of those other guys, um, they'll never know. Those guys who are the top pick in the draft will never know what it feels like to really have to pay your dues and to really get knocked in the dirt and have to pick yourself up and to, continue to believe in yourself when everybody else is saying no. Once you end up overcoming that, you get a sense of satisfaction, a sense of accomplishment, just a sense that, again, the top pick in the draft, due to no fault of their own, other than just being too awesome, they can never really feel that. And so I know again that I myself, the sense of satisfaction that I feel, man, every morning I just come flying out of bed, just reminding myself how lucky I am to have become what I wanted to be. And so I'm essentially like the kid that dreamed of becoming president who became president. And so, yeah, there are difficult parts of this business. It's not all fun and games, but people are like, gee, don't you think what you do is grueling and stressful? No, what's grueling is digging ditches or, laying bricks or doing stuff like that. I mean, I've become exactly what I wanted to be. We get treated royally. I've been fortunate to make a good living throughout the years. And so for me to complain about the parts of this business that I don't love would be like winning the lottery and complaining about the taxes.
That's a good analogy.
That's a very good analogy. Yeah, and I'm sure your clients also can respect that you have their back and that you've come from like similar levels of adversity as they have that they've overcome as well throughout their careers. And honestly, I know you talked about some college athletes and due to the introduction of NIL from my reading in 2021, the NFLPA permitted NFL agents to represent college players in NIL marketing agreements. So, um, to my knowledge, you're currently representing a few NCAA football athletes, including your client and former Kansas quarterback Jason Bean, who you successfully negotiated an entry-level contract for with the Colts this offseason. So I was just wondering, how has this change involving NIL affected your outlook on signing clients such as Jason?
That's a great question. And in the case of Jason, here's a guy who really came on big time in his senior year. And so, ultimately he was the MVP of the bowl game, set the record. What was it? 450 yards, I think 5 passing touchdowns, something like that. And so it was great to be able to get with a guy like him when I did, because and this guy I think has an incredibly bright future. He was one of the best quarterbacks in the entire NFL this preseason. He was the fastest guy in the NCAA last year as far as time speed on the field, but he's really developed into a much more polished passer, very accurate, good arm strength. So it seems like every tool is there to succeed with. But again, this is a guy who kind of came on later in his college career, so NIL wasn't as much of an issue, and he did have an NIL agent at that point. And most of the guys that you recruit these days out of college do. I don't get as active in the NIL game myself, and it's one of those things where you quickly have to identify any player that you're reaching out to work with. If you find out that they have an NIL agent who's also an NFLPA certified contract advisor, it's pretty clear to see that the relationship is already established. Yet I've always had the ability to sort of find the right guys, guys that are a little bit under the radar, guys who have the talent, and there's a few other guys in the last couple of years as well, real good guys that I've been able to get who have bright futures, where the NIL thing was less of a impediment to getting them than it could be for some other players out there.
Sure. And I guess that's also with like the under the radar, you can kind of dodge some of the NIL commotion and everything like that, because the lower guys aren't obviously getting those crazy big deals like the top athletes, I guess. Cole, is your question next? You want me to take the next one?
Yeah, you got the next one, Andrew. Yeah.
All right, how are we doing on time?
I think we got we're gonna try and keep it under 30. I think we got time for one more question here.
All right, we'll do one more.
We can do like another 5 minutes or whatever you guys need.
All right, for sure.
Thanks, Brett.
So
Yep.
I'm kind of just curious about this. I want to get into more of a fun question. From our discussions, it's well documented on your socials and everything that you are a huge Florida Panthers fan. And I'm sorry, I don't know. I'm a Bruins fan, so I mean your team was better
Andrew?
this year.
Hey, if you want to talk Florida Panthers hockey, I'll give you guys another hour. How's that?
Oh, okay. All right. Well, Cole had a question about his hometown Leafs. I'm not on the same bandwagon as him because I know they're not going to win. But he's wondering what are your predictions this year in the Atlantic with your Florida Panthers, my Bruins, his Leafs?
It's a tough division. I mean, it makes it even more impressive what the Panthers were able to do because, when you're going through the playoffs, even in the first round, there's no easy out. In Toronto, obviously you've got Matthews and there's a lot of other talent. So, I mean, that's a team that can score some points pretty quickly. Bruins are the Bruins. I mean, regular season, I don't think there's ever been a more dominant team in the last couple of years. But as we've seen with the President's Cup, which the Panthers won a few years ago, barely made it through the first round and then ended up getting bounced. So President's Cup is not necessarily a precursor to postseason success. But it's just really been enjoyable because the thing about it is, like, growing up in South Florida, I never followed hockey, never played hockey. I can't skate. It's just one of those things where randomly a buddy of mine, when our sons were probably like 5, 9, 10 years ago, we had the idea of, hey, let's just go to a Panthers game just to try something different, see if the kids like it. And, he and his son thought it was okay. But me and my son thought it was the greatest. We were right down on the ice. And so next day I called, bought full season tickets right down on the ice. At that point, a lot of people weren't going to the games. So we have 4 tickets. We have our own row right next to the players' entrance. And awesome. And so over time, I've made a lot of friends in that organization. In fact, tomorrow, the COO invited me to a private party in Fort Lauderdale with the Stanley Cup. And then on Thursday, we fly to New York. I'm taking the whole family. The owner of the team invited us to a party at his house with the Cup. And they said we could pretty much do anything with it besides jump in the pool. So that'll be a real treat for all of us. And it's just been a lot of fun watching that team progress, just organizationally, watching them get it right in the front office and get it right in the coaching hires. And it's funny, what the thing I love about hockey is I get to just be an idiot fan because, like most people that tried talking football with me, it's nice that they're passionate, and obviously fans are what keep our sport going. But everyone wants to come up and talk football, and some of the stuff I hear, I'm just like, yeah, whatever. But that's kind of me with hockey. Like I don't, I can just sit there and I feel watching hockey like I did when I was like 10, 11, 12, watching baseball or football. So,
It's pure
you know,
enjoyment.
it's really cool. I have learned the game pretty well now, but
Yeah.
I'm much more educated on it now than I was. But it's just been amazing watching that team accomplish what they have.
For sure. And that's one thing, like as much as I'll give some pushback towards the Florida Panthers for being too damn good. Um, they've really done a great job, like you said, in their front office and everything. And one thing I can definitely say is they've definitely grown the game. Like if you look for like you said, 10 years ago, or whatever, you looked in the Florida Panthers barn, it's not they're not selling out the tickets. And now like they've
Mhm.
got a following now. They're growing the game, and that's at the end of the day, that's better than that's the best thing you can ask for, right? And I don't know how it is on the youth level if there's more hockey leagues coming up because of it.
Oh,
I would
a
assume
lot,
that
a lot of
hockey's
it
getting
down here.
way
A lot,
bigger now.
yeah, a lot of the kids in the neighborhood here, probably like 2 miles from my house, there's the Ice Den where the Panthers, up until this year, would train. Now they've moved to downtown Fort Lauderdale in a new state-of-the-art facility. But no, there's a lot of youth ice hockey down here now. And in fact, you're seeing players in the NHL who have come up from down here.
Yeah.
And so, and again, I guess one thing that I really respect and appreciate and in a way can sort of relate to with the Panthers, it's a blue collar team. There's no real prima donnas on this team. There's no,
Mhm.
just guys who are just scorers that won't hit someone or won't do what they need to do to help their teammates. So, when you've got guys like Matthew Kachuk and you've got guys like, some of the other, yeah,
Bennett,
I could see you're not a fan, Andrew. And if I were a fan of the Bruins, I wouldn't be his
Hey,
fan either.
it's the same thing
yeah.
as Brad Marchand. You love him on your team, and everyone else in the league hates him. So
Exactly.
So here's the funny thing. I've actually always liked Marchand
you know
just
what?
because I respect him
Of
because
course.
those are the kind of guys that I represent, guys who are tough,
Yep.
hardworking, smart players. He's definitely not the biggest guy.
Oh
He's
God, no.
not the tallest guy, but that guy, no matter how much money you pay him, he will never change who and what he is. And that's why guys like that are so valuable to have. And the Panthers have probably, 4 or 5 guys like Sam Bennett, guys like, and so even guys like Barkov, who are very talented, guys like Verhage, um,
Mm.
those guys obviously are a little more finesse style, but still those guys will do what they need to do and they work hard and they're good guys in the locker room and they're respected. So I really think chemistry sometimes is underrated. And I guarantee you, if you look up and down the rosters of the teams that the Panthers had to beat, including Edmonton in the finals, I mean, how the hell do you beat a team with McJesus and Draisaitl and some of those
Yeah.
other guys? I mean, on paper,
Yeah.
uh, I mean, the Oilers are the most talented team on the planet. But as we've discussed in this conversation, and as you've seen from some of your experiences in life, sometimes talent alone isn't all that matters.
Hard
For
work
sure,
beats
Brett.
talent
And
every
that's
time.
exactly. And I wish the Leafs had more of those guys. We're actually running out of time here. We're gonna get kicked off this meeting in about a minute, I think. So,
All right, we'll
with
wrap it
that
up.
said, yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Brett. That includes our episode for today. Thank you for your valuable insights and taking the time to join us. Enjoy that cup party, and hopefully the Peas they don't repeat this year. Maybe they'll give the Leafs a playoff win, but I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for that insight.
My pleasure, guys. Good talking to you. We'll keep in touch.
Thank you so much,
For
Brett.
sure. Thank you so much, Brett. Have a good one.
See
You
ya.
too.